Now, this is how you begin a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment resolution if you want to be a grandstander, is you dress the person down to their face initially. But then you need to follow up by actually filing a resolution of what you just said. Now, this is Senator Chris Murphy, and there's the title of it. And here's the date it was posted. So listen to this a bit.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. I'm sorry that I missed your call yesterday. I look forward to working closely with you. I say this with seriousness and respect, but your department is out of control. You are spending like you don't have a budget. You're on the verge of running out of money for the fiscal year. You are illegally refusing to spend funds that have been authorized by this Congress and appropriated by this committee. You are ignoring the immigration laws of this nation, implementing a brand new immigration system that you have invented that has little relation to the statutes that you are required, that you are commanded to follow, as spelled out in your oath of office. You are routinely violating the rights of immigrants who may not be citizens, but whether you like it or not, they have constitutional and statutory rights when they reside in the United States. Your agency acts as if laws don't matter, as if the election gave you some mandate to violate the Constitution and the laws passed by this Congress. It did not give you that mandate. You act as if your disagreement with the law, or even the public's disagreement with the law, is relevant and gives you the ability to create your own law. It does not give you that ability. Let's start with your spending. You are on track to trigger the...
And as you can see, that's only 1 minute of a 6-minute, almost 7-minute dress down. You should listen to the whole thing. But basically, if he just takes what he says here, turns it into a resolution, puts the preambles of the Supreme Court ruling in Trump v. Anderson at the top as shown in the resolution at sadpac.com, and puts Kristi Noem's name on it, and files it as a privileged resolution in the Senate, if she does not reach a 2/3 majority vote to excuse all the conduct that he just enumerated, which he's about to detail further, she's out. She is barred from office, removed from office, and will never serve in any office, in any government, anywhere, ever again. That's how you do a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation, by resolution. That's called legislation. It is legislation. It's private legislation. It's private in personam legislation. Anything Congress does that results in a result is legislation. So, Mr. Murphy was sent a letter by regular mail of how to do things. We'll see if he wakes up. This is Sarah Kendazor on the Mark Thompson Show. There's the URL up at the top. There's the full title. And this is the date it was posted. Now, she, along with David K. Johnston, are two somewhat true experts on Donald Trump, and you need to watch this entire show. So she goes through the fact that not only did the Democrats know what Trump was all about, they also knew, the Department of Justice also knew how bad of news he was.
Wipe the minds clean of Americans who could remember the 1980s, 1990s, and kind of recast them in a new mold. And I don't think it was as effective in people who grew up in kind of the tri-state area where they might have read New York tabloids and stuff like that. But I remember during the 2016 campaign when I was covering it here in St. Louis, and I was interviewing Trump supporters about why they liked him. The Apprentice was one of the main reasons. They genuinely thought he was a very successful businessman. They had no idea about all of the bankruptcies, all the financial crimes, the ties to the mafia. They kept thinking if those were important, then the media would have told us. And I was like, well, they did. You know, when I was a child, when I was a teenager, they talked about it a lot, but now they're not bringing it up at all. Isn't that strange? So yeah, it served its purpose very well.
Well, it served its purpose, and you are so right about the fact that the image of Donald Trump was reconstituted in this way, and it wasn't done in it didn't seem that the goal was any kind of political one. It was a television one. It was to, show those shots of him slow motion walking from the Trump helicopter and to establish his bona fides as a businessman, and so that he could then hold court over these game show contestants who are all trying. But that was what it was, and it was done so well. My friend actually was the NBC executive who bought The Apprentice, and he said, I didn't buy it for Donald Trump. I thought Donald Trump was a joke. He said, I bought it for Mark Burnett. I knew Mark Burnett would make it great, and he did make it great in the sense that he successfully changed our vision of Donald Trump, and it became, it's the, what is it, the fruit of the poison tree that we were, and it really is what we're dealing with. But what you also talked about in that, but so that was The Apprentice, and I like that because, as we say, that became the launching pad, I think, to sort of again reimagining who this guy is and what how great he could be. But what you talk about in the book also, and this is your last book, Hiding in Plain Sight, is you talk about all the ways in which this guy is clearly corrupt and has been corrupt. You did a lot of research and explanation and laying out the ways in which, in real estate, he could do everything from, just outright cheating in some ways that high-end real estate people do to money laundering. I know you talk about that in the book. I wonder if you could just spend a moment talking about the corruption that was already part of the Trump world prior to even becoming president.
Yeah, I mean, Trump was immersed in corruption from the moment that he entered public life as a dual protege of his father, Fred Trump, who had his own corruption scandals. But of course, as Roy Cohn's mentee, Roy Cohn is one of the most corrupt figures in American history, and I think one of the most influential of the latter 20th century. He was the lawyer for Joe McCarthy, for multiple mafia families, for Nixon, for Reagan. He was a political advisor to the GOP, and he was able also to successfully manipulate the media and manipulate the courts, and those are the areas in which Trump has thrived. And so he taught Trump a lot of tools of the trade in terms of propaganda, in terms of things like it doesn't matter, what the case is, it matters what the judge is. I'm misquoting him slightly, but that was basically his frame of mind, that it doesn't matter what you do, it matters who you know. And so he made sure that Trump knew everyone, from mafia goons to actual powerful businessmen, people, corporate raiders like Carl Icahn, to politicians, to entertainment figures. Trump was never an outsider. That was one of the most ridiculous things about the 2016 campaign, was the way that he tried to portray himself as some sort of neophyte outsider, when he had actually run for president before, almost ran in 88, in 96, ran in 2000, ran in 2012. He had once said that he would not run for president unless he felt he would be appointed, unless he felt that he was guaranteed to win. And so that's very interesting that he went on to run again finally in 2016. But yeah, you can look at Trump Tower, which was basically a dorm for the Russian mafia. You could look at his ties to the Italian-American mafia before that. And I should note that, there was a big change in organized crime in the 80s and 90s, where the Italian mafia was cracked down upon by people like Trump's close friend and later his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, only for them to make way for mafiosos from the former Soviet Union, who are often referred to as the Russian mafia, but are really a transnational mafia. They operate in countries all over the world. They have multiple passports. They have nowadays digital currency. They really kind of redefine the idea of borders, and they are much more vicious, much more lethal than the Italian-American mafia ever was. And so that was Trump's world. It was a world in which he could always go free. in which he was considered above the law. The DOJ first started investigating him in 1973. I think the question of why he was never held accountable in a meaningful way, a way which might prevent him from running for office, for example, or contain him in some form, is a huge question of our times, and it's one that really isn't addressed in a very serious way.
Well, it's interesting that there were.
And so, Sarah doesn't play. She just went right to it. And that's the real story. So, next up is Senator Chris Murphy, who dresses down Kristi Noem with basically a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment oral complaint. He just needs to transform it into a resolution and file it. Stop working with her. Transform all she's done into a resolution and file it. That's your job on the support and defend the Constitution side. Since you can't do legislation, you're not in the majority, it doesn't take the majority to file a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation. It takes a 2/3 majority to excuse it, which she won't get. Here's David K. Johnston on the Mark Thompson Show. Mark Thompson has him on regularly. There's the URL up at the top. You can stop at the ampersand T equals 1250 because that's where this is going to jump to. David unfortunately has diarrhea of the mouth. It's a good diarrhea of the mouth, but in the end, he doesn't present a solution. I've never heard him present a solution, and this is the reason why we need to remove Trump from office. And so, and this is how to do it, blah, blah, blah. Here, it's May 6th, is that this was posted. And the trouble with this is that everybody seems to be talking, and nobody is saying he needs to go. They're watching him destroy the United States, and it's like they're just standing there, letting him do it. And that's the huge disrespect that I have. But he in this clip, he goes and he talks about the Democrats not having a clue what to do with Donald Trump. Well, if these people would read some of their emails and read some of what people are saying, and maybe if people wouldn't flood them with a whole lot of one-liners, do something, get rid of him, do something, and instead would send some meaningful information, maybe they could do something. Now, Representative Sri Thanadar did file articles of impeachment, but they're woefully inadequate. But the thing behind that is no one reported on it. The Democrats have not gotten behind it. They haven't said, well, maybe we should do this instead of those articles of impeachment. I'm not sure they'll ever come to the floor for a vote because Mike Johnson has this trick where he's declared the entire session one day. So the second day will never arrive to ripen the privileged resolution to where it is automatically acted upon. Anyway, give this a listen.
With him or in person, but I didn't say, well, that went better than I expected. Because all you had to do was butter him up, no matter how angry he was at you about something, and start telling him how wonderful he is, and pretty soon he gives away the store. He's a terrible negotiator. It's part of the fraud he's created, that he's this great businessman. I noticed in the chat, somebody asked about the Democrats. Every day I get, please send $5 or $1 or $3 from the Democrats. I get it from Donald, too, and his merch, which is all made in China almost. Everything.
That is the wild part. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but the Democrats really haven't figured out, after all this time, how to deal with Donald. And AOC and Bernie are not at the center of the party. They're not. Their oligarchy tour is not going to change the country.
That's true.
The Democrats have to figure out that J.B. Pritzker, the billionaire governor of Illinois, got it a lot better. And he's overall done a better job. I don't think he's going to be a candidate either. But
probably not.
Why do you say that, David? Why do you say that?
Well, partly because, he's the size of Chris Christie, and a lot of people get turned off by that, like it or not. I mean, people have all these biases.
Sure.
Think of all the people who just can't stand Hillary Clinton because she's a woman. And it's ridiculous. The color of your skin should have nothing to do with the color of your hair. It should be the substance of your character and your conduct. But
now you're dreaming.
Donald Trump isn't exactly Slim Shady, though.
No, he's certainly. I mean, he doesn't really only weigh 239 pounds. I'm shocked.
But I take your point. Okay, that's
And
yeah.
Well, none of this is funny, but here's the point. What bothers me is that the Democrats were so stupid that I don't know how they didn't know that Kamala Harris would have no chance because of the Hillary effect and the color of her skin, if nothing else but by name. Now, Kamala Harris is not a black woman. She may have went to Howard. She may identify with being black. But her birth certificate doesn't say, it says something otherwise. It says that she is Jamaica, African American, India, Caucasian. Meaning in India there's a Caucasian. There's certain types of the Indians that are of a certain skin complexion are considered Caucasian when they are of a certain British lineage, and she fell into that. Her mother fell into that category. Her alleged father, Donald J. Harris, is supposedly Jamaican African American. But there is some argument, and we'll never know that that's not her father, because her mother clung to Donald. They met at some rally, and then she clung to Donald. And then soon after that, Kamala was born. Now, the rumor and the story is that Kamala's father is actually Caucasian. He's actually a professor. He was actually a professor that her mother was messing around with. Now, no way to know that without a DNA test. But they kept calling Kamala Harris black. She's a black woman. She's a black woman. If you were blind and had come from another planet, and they told you that the candidate for president was a black woman, and they lined up all these women, and let's say it's Letitia James and the girl from Georgia, forgot her name, and let's just say Nicole Wallace and Kamala Harris, nobody would pick out anybody but Letitia James. That's what America's all about, right there. And so there was no way. As soon as Biden cast his support to Kamala, I knew we were done. I knew Trump was coming back again. And it didn't matter what he said. And all he had to do was start treating her in racist manners. It wasn't going to matter what she did. That and the fact she was 5'3" and a little quippy mouthed. Doesn't matter that she was a lawyer. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter all of her years of government service. Didn't matter. But what really didn't help her was that she wouldn't answer a straight question. she couldn't answer a straight question. And she seemed a little spaghetti brain when she did try to answer a question. So the skin color doesn't matter, and the character in this case didn't help her. And so here, David K. Johnston describes that the Trump government is a government of the worst. If that's so, then why aren't you promoting a way to remove it, to stop it, to get rid of him?
Place in the same amount of time, they're going to say, "Oh no, we're pro-vaccine," even as they're anti-vaccine, and this is a further example of this is a government. It's a kakistocracy, to use a 17th century word taken out of two ancient Greek words. It's a government of the worst, and that's what we have. The government of the absolute worst. People who do not know what they're doing, who are utterly immoral. Who don't care about rules and norms and individual liberty. And healthcare is going to be a key area in this, because they're not only going to cut money from Medicaid, but they're not going to increase reimbursement levels for Medicare. And sooner or later, one of these really dangerous viruses, MERS, Marburg, is going to get loose, because we're no longer giving antivirals to people where we've corralled it in places in Africa and the Middle East. And once it gets on jetliners and hopscotches around the planet, we'll have another pandemic. Now we'll go, who could have known? Remember, Barack Obama thought that the risk of a pandemic was so important that he had a White House team of about, I think it was 17 people, to make sure that they were in connection everywhere in the world, so that anything looking like a pandemic started, bingo, we would be on it. And it was one of the first things in the first term that Trump shut down.
It was one of the celebrated apps.
So, I'm just like, why isn't anybody doing anything? Especially when they've been told how to do it. And here, they're talking about the emoluments, which are just being clauses, which are being ignored.
Seeing it through the digital currencies that Trump has now created a huge buy-in, literal buy-in from the feds on.
Right.
And he has a digital platform, like a Coinbase thing. His family does, okay? It's run by his son. And it's also run by the son of one of his cabinet officials. His secretary's not the guy who's doing the Witkoff, the guy who's doing the Russian negotiations.
His negotiator for the Gaza war and the Ukraine war.
Thank you.
Donald has not filed his ethics statement, or at least I can't find it online. I can't find a news account about it. The last one he filed was in August. I'm not surprised he's thumbing his nose at the law about this, but he's supposed to file an ethics statement. Secondly, the Constitution says that the president and vice president may not receive any gift of any kind whatsoever from a foreign government or the states. And the states would include, because remember, the states are co-equal to the Constitution except for a few areas. Cities and counties and mosquito abatement districts, those are all creatures of the state. And yet he's out there doing deals and taking money from these outfits in direct violation of the Constitution. And this goes to a problem, Mark, that in the first term, there were several lawsuits brought for Trump violating the Emoluments Clause, which he was openly, clearly doing. And the position of the federal judges who got the cases was, you don't have standing to bring such a case. And that's why I refer to our Constitution as the unenforceable Constitution. It is
No, it's not. It's that Congress must do it. All violations of the Constitution are rebellions to the Constitution, which are Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violations, which only Congress may enforce, but it only takes one member of Congress to initiate the congressional litigation by legislation on which they identify the specific rebellion to the congressional laws or the Constitution and show the proof that it happened. Then the up or down vote results in the harshest possible punishment, removal from office. This is Jessica Denson's latest live stream. First of all, live shows are not the best way to go. They're not structured. They don't go anywhere. It's just a meandering, non-focused discussion between two people. And when they're both wrong, the average person sitting out there listening to it says, never argue with a fool. Listeners can't tell which is which. Well, in this case, they're both fools. But well-meaning. They are well-meaning fools. Mr. Thanadar, he doesn't seem to understand. The numbers aren't with you. It doesn't matter if it's right. The numbers won't work. And Jessica Denson, I don't know. She just doesn't get it at all. You can be against Donald Trump all you want. He is never going to resign. There is one way to get him out of office, and it is through the resolution at sadpac.com. Now, in the interview, Mr. Thanadar, that's him in the middle, says Al Green joined him. Well, Al Green is 77, Thanadar is 70. He may not look 70, but he is. And neither of them are lawyers. He tells this story about how he grew up poor in India and went to college and got a PhD. That doesn't make you a strategist. It just makes you an educated non-strategist. And here's the thing. It's very simple. The URLs, they're up at the top. This is the full title. And the date is posted is May 9th. Now, a letter was sent to Mr. Thanadar's office. And tracking shows it was attempted to be delivered on May 10th. So he doesn't know yet that there is the better and proper way to do it. And it was sent also to maybe 7 or 8 others between Congress and the House of Representatives by regular mail, which means no tracking. So we'll see if he wakes up and if he's smart enough to see if he wants to get this done, this is the way to do it. Because the Section 3 solution boxes people in. This is what the Constitution was intended to do. Congress has 2 functions, the legislative function and the policing of the government function by supporting and defending the Constitution. Okay, we're working on the policing function right here because they can't get anything legislatively done because they're not in the majority as they keep crying. The Democratic majority, the Democratic leadership, says they're not in the majority and they're telling Thanadar it's never going to work, we won't support you, blah, 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 because, frankly, impeachment will never work. And it is very sad that Jessica Denson is too stupid to see when the numbers aren't with you, you better find another path. Now, we know she's aware of the sadpac.com website because she responded once and said, we're sorry, we're so sorry you're misguided. Take my name down before I have my lawyers sue you. So we know she's aware of it. She still remains on this hard-headed path to stupidity. She thinks she's doing something, and she's not. She's leading people down this impeachment road, and John Boniface has collected however 500,000 signatures for a petition for impeachment. Impeachment doesn't work by petition, and Boniface is a lawyer. It doesn't matter how many people want him impeached. What matters is 67 senators are going to have to vote to convict. And even if they do, you're left with the Trump administration. And even though Trump's removed as the official president, he will remain as the shadow president. He will remain pulling puppet strings in the background. And the only way to rid ourselves of the Trump administration and all his minions is by a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment call for amnesty vote, in which the January 6, 2021 riot and attempt to stay in power by rebellion with the fake elector scheme is a part of the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment resolution, as shown at sadpack.com. So, listen to this. And, like, duh.
I'm going to talk about gloom and doom. I'm not going to worry about, hey, we did this twice before, should we do this again? Absolutely. We need to stand up and say this, because this man is destroying our country, this man is destroying our democracy, and this man has abused his power of his office.
Absolutely. And you were talking about people coming to you and asking you, what can we do? How can they help? And I, as you know, have been very active in the activism space. I didn't ever imagine that I would be somebody who was planning and staging protests, but this is what I have become. And so I've been very involved in the protest movement.
And a bad
over
one
the
at
past
that.
several months. We were the first in January in DC from the 3rd to the 5th. And then, of course, you know that this movement has grown to millions in the streets. And one of my frustrations, and I know some of my co-organizers and some of the people that, you know, are really invested in this space for Trump's immediate impeachment and removal by any and all constitutional means, are frustrated by the lack of direct messaging in these protests. And so...
Stop right there. There you have it. Okay, if she's organizing all these protests, then you need to get a focus. Because what are you protesting? What are you trying to do? And she's just terrible at this. And it's not that she's terrible at listening to people. It's that she's terrible and won't listen to people. So, I don't fault Danadar. His letter will be delivered on Monday. His staff, if someone reads it, may bring it to his attention. And he may then turn around and then file the proper resolution to get this done. Because he's motivated. And Jessica, I don't have anything nice to say. Because it's one thing to be wrong, but it's one thing to be wrong and stay wrong and insist you stay wrong when people are telling you, showing you, putting it in writing how you are wrong. Visit sadpack.com, read the page, read the resolution, which is slightly updated. It could still be updated again. And behind this is what Judge Luttig has said. Now, Judge Luttig analyzed it as to just what Trump is doing, as almost everything Trump has done has been illegal and unconstitutional. In this clip, Danadar reveals the real reason most Democrats, most people in Congress, don't want to go against Trump in any way. And it's not good.
For your own articles, but to my understanding, even other representatives could be doing it for yours. Do you plan on invoking Rule 9 to force a vote on your articles of impeachment?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And this is the first time I'm saying that, so we're creating some news on Lights On. But yes, I am, I think it's important. I know many in the establishment, party establishment, do not want me to do this. They do not want people to have to make that decision. And I think it's about time that we stand up. And not only Democrats, but Republicans. That either you are for this tyranny and dictatorship and unconstitutional impeachable misconduct or you're against it. And it's time for all of us to say where do we stand.
Excellent. I'm very, very happy to hear that. Can you give us any sort of timeline on when you plan to do that?
Very soon, a matter of days. I will be taking this, and I'm not going to ask for anybody's permission to do this. I'm just going to do this because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to just do it to protect our democracy. I'm going to do it because that's my job, not anything else. It's my job to represent my constituents. It's my job to uphold our Constitution, and I'm going to do that. I have been attacked on social media non-stop. My office has received 74 death threats. People have even called my home, and my wife has to pick up a phone, and she was terrified with some of the calls that she had to pick up. So this is really the price that you pay. This is the price, but this is the price worth paying for the greatness of America. We have to protect the greatness of America, and I am not going to worry about my re-election. I'm not going to worry about who is going to come after me. I'm not going to worry about all those attacks on me on social media. There's memes, and there's just people are distorting my background, they're distorting my pictures, my looks, and that is just my voice. They're just distorting everything. They're just going all out. And I have decided to do 2 more town halls this weekend, and I was told that they are going to disrupt my town halls. But I'm going to fearlessly go there, engage with my constituents, listen to my constituents. That's my job. I'm not doing a favor. This is my job, and this is why I love this country. I had nothing when I came to this country, and this country has given me so much, and it is my job to give back. So I'm so grateful to America. I'm so grateful for everything the United States of America has given me.
Now there's zealousness, and then there's stupidity. And this is why no one in Congress wants to go against Trump. All of them are afraid of the death threats. The death threats that may be actualized, that may actually happen. The things that could be done to harm them, kill them, just generally drive them crazy. And so I salute him. It would be better off if he had had the right document in the first place. Because the sadpack.com resolution will work. It will end the scenario because it's the reverse of impeachment. In impeachment, all you got to do, you get out of the House, and then there's an impeachment trial, and then in the Senate, you have to get a 2/3 majority vote to convict. And then it only removes the president and then leaves us with Vance. With the SADPAC resolution, it declares Mr. Trump disqualified, unable to hold office. And in this case, it would be retroactive, as they say, nunc pro tunc in the legal vernacular, back to the date it was effective. And in this case, January 6, 2021 was when he became disqualified. And the Congress can get around to enacting that, actualizing that at any time. So if they actualize it after he's taken office, well, then he is removed from office. His office is annulled. All of his acts are annulled. Everything he did is erased from effectiveness, except those things that might be criminal and might be continuing on in the courts. And he's removed. Then the Constitution provides that the next runner-up in the election is instated. And that would be Harris and Waltz. And then she would pick an administration to replace all those people that have been flushed. All those people who have been fired would be reinstated to their jobs. So there's a big difference, Jessica. There's a big difference in what you're trying to do. And if you had a clue on which one was the right one, you might be worth listening to. But you're not. It's not any and all means, any and all constitutional means. No, it is the proper one to use. I just don't know what to say. This is where you find the Ryan Lizza interview with Judge Michael Luttig. It's May 7th, 2025, as you can see. This is going to be an edited version because sadly, this is what it looks like. There's the link up at the top. Sadly, Mr. Lizza has got diarrhea of the mouth. And he's stumbling around and stuttering around, and he doesn't have anything to add. So pretty much of what he says is edited. This is how you find the entire interview. There's some things said in it, and basically Judge Luttig calls for the removal of Donald Trump. He says some things that he's done are impeachable. Everybody's stuck on the word impeachment. It's really sad and alarming that people can't seem to understand that Congress has two functions, legislative and then a police function, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Okay? And that's the part they don't seem to remember in the oath. So the way you support and defend the Constitution is through Section 3 of the 14th Amendment as to government officials. And it is the quintessential, to use one of Judge Luttig's favorite words, quintessential firing of a person. There is no mercy. There is no probationary period. If you do the deed, you're fired. And that's what the Constitution says. That's what the Supreme Court of the United States ruled. They said they don't have anything to do with it. Congress enforces the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment occurred after, obviously, the creation of the Constitution, because it was realized that the impeachment is worthless. It's not going to work, especially when there are people who are insurrectionists in the government trying to destroy the government. Because after the Civil War, that's what it was. People were doing as they are today. They want to change the government into what they want it to be, and that includes destroying the Constitution. So, yes, I realize that the mouths are moving and there's no sound, but you're not missing anything, because we're going to start where Judge Luttig actually is saying something of meaningful value, and all the setup and lead in by Mr. Lizza is quite frankly irrelevant to what Judge Luttig has to say.
Yes, I'll be glad to, Ryan. I was asked to write a piece on the rule of law and Donald Trump during the president's first 100 days. And I was honored to accept that invitation. And I expect the piece to come out in the next day or two. It was an interesting vignette for your listeners and viewers. I began the article only maybe 10 days ago, and 3 or 4 days into it, I told the people I was writing it for that I just couldn't even do this because every single day there were 3 or 4 major issues of law and constitutional law that came up, and I would end up having to rewrite on that day everything that I had written the day before. And I said, we just have to wait until there's at least a hiatus of 2 or 3 days, or we'll never get this out the door. And then 2 days later, Trump did something, and I returned and said, "Look, let's do this, and I'll get you a draft as quickly as I can." But that kind of is the setup for that first sentence of one of the paragraphs in early paragraphs in the piece. And of course, Ryan, and I hope your viewers know that I don't put a single word down on a piece of paper, or speak a single word that I can't back up. Okay.
I do know that.
And so when I say that for not one of his signature initiatives does he have constitutional authority or authority under the laws of the United States, I mean just that. So I've read, many of the briefs that have been filed challenging those actions, um, and I've of course reviewed the court decisions that have disposed of those claims to date. And then, I came up with my own conclusions of law, like I always do. And that conclusion was that for not one of these signature items does the president have authority. So let's start with the tariffs, which are, the president has unilaterally ordered crippling global tariffs that threaten to bring on inflation and recession, not just domestically, but globally. And so today, several months later, the world is roiled by Donald Trump's unilateral imposition of those tariffs. Now, on the law, um, the Congress of the United States is given the authority in the Constitution to levy taxes and tariffs. Now, in this instance, not in this instance, years ago, Congress delegated some authority in limited circumstances to a president to order tariffs in an emergency. And if the president does that, the tariffs that he orders must be very narrow, very tightly circumscribed to the particular emergency. In fact, the law seems to contemplate tariffs against a single country, for instance, and then those tariffs are to be very limited in duration. So there's no question at all that Donald Trump does not have the authority under the particular statute delegating him authority. It's the IEEPA. To order the sweeping tariffs that he did. And that's just the first example in that list of mine for this reason. That the plaintiffs are challenging him first under the IEEPA. In adjudicating that claim, any court would have to address the so-called major questions doctrine that was set down by the Supreme Court several years ago. In essence, that holds that for any major question of the allocation of power between Congress and the president, Congress must have spoken exceedingly clearly in order for the president to have the power and authority that he claims. Now, how is that relevant here? Well, it's very relevant for this reason. The IEEPA doesn't even mention tariffs. No president of the United States has ever invoked the IEEPA to order tariffs. And for all of these assertions of power, the constitutional and legal arguments that Donald Trump is making border on the frivolous. And most of them are contemptuous of the Constitution and the laws of the United States. The federal courts across the land are beginning to understand what's afoot with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
As each one of these courts listens to his claims about the Constitution and the laws of the United States, the federal judges across the country are flabbergasted that the president would even make such absurd arguments. Now, turning to that, the Colorado case in particular, let me diagram that passage quickly. So this case is a case involving one of the deportations of immigrants, some of them illegal, some not, to the United States. This has probably been his most spectacular initiative because it's aimed at ridding the nation of its illegal immigrants. But it's also been one of his most spectacular failures. The same could be said, Ryan, about his tariffs, okay? But as to the deportations, the president has, invoked the Alien Enemies Act, which requires an emergency and an invasion of the United States. And Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has gone into the courts of the United States and says the United States has been invaded by this handful of illegal immigrants from Venezuela, for instance. Well, the argument's laughable, and he knows what he's doing, and he's got the full-throated support of the Attorney General of the United States, who is telling him that these arguments are credible, when in fact, not only are they incredible, they're contemptuous of the federal courts and of the Constitution of the United States. But the reference to Article 3, just so that your viewers can understand it, is what that judge was saying is that that Donald Trump wants to read out of the Constitution Article 3, which establishes the federal judiciary as the final interpreter of the Constitution. And so, but the judge's statement was apt, because not just in these Alien Enemy Act cases, but for instance, in the tariff cases, the executive order cases against the law firms, Donald Trump is literally, as a matter of constitutional law, is asserting the power to interpret the Constitution of the United States. Nothing short of that, Ryan. I don't know what's inside the president's mind, and I will not purport to, but I doubt that he has any idea what he's saying,
Sure. Yeah.
or what his lawyers are saying. Now, what his lawyers are saying to the lawyer, Ryan, at this point, is that the federal courts, up to and including the Supreme Court, does not have the power to review these actions by the president. Yes, and that argument is grounded in constitutional doctrine and Supreme Court cases for almost 250 years. But the general doctrine is only that in national security matters, there are times, very, very few in number throughout our history, where the president wants to take action in defense of the nation. The Supreme Court has held that in those very limited instances, Ryan, the courts cannot sit in judicial review of those very limited decisions. Contrast that with the arguments that Trump's made in his first 100 days. Not one single one of them falls into that strain of constitutional interpretation that you identified. And that brings to mind the executive orders, the utterly corrupt.
Let's go through those.
Yeah, executive orders that the president has issued against the nation's law firms and individual lawyers.
Yeah.
That it began with Perkins Coie, and for that I would just cite your viewers to a single paragraph in the Williams and Connolly brief in support of Perkins Coie. I don't have it here in front of me, but it's one of the most remarkable paragraphs that has ever been written in all of American history in a brief before a federal court. And Williams and Connolly just ticks off the president's executive order against Perkins Coie. It violates the First Amendment for this reason. It violates the 14th Amendment for this reason. It violates the Fifth Amendment for this reason. It violates the Sixth Amendment for this reason. It violates literally the separation of powers for this reason. And you can expect to see that paragraph quoted in this article that I'm going to do. Yeah, Ryan, it was offensive. The 4 or 5 or 6 firms now that were some of the so-called big law firms, by which is meant big New York law firms, and or Washington law firms. And, it began with Paul Weiss. Paul Weiss, they sold out their own lawyers. They sold out their own clients. They sold out their sister law firms, who had also been subject to targeting executive orders by the president. They sold out the legal profession, and ultimately, Ryan, they sold out the rule of law in America, solely to protect their own partner draws, and of course, 2 or 3 or 4 law firms chose a different path at great cost to the firms and to their lawyers, but that's because those firms believe in the Constitution and the rule of law, and they made the decision that I would have made, which is, I would have spent my last penny if that's what it took to challenge this palpable unconstitutional act by the president. And it's not just unconstitutional and unlawful, Ryan, as you know. This is pure personal vendetta against these law firms and their clients and lawyers that were there in the past. And never before in American history has a president, as much as it never has occurred to a president to do something like this. And and of course, Donald Trump has ignored the federal courts on that, and because he knows that whether a court ever agrees with him or not, he will have achieved his objective, which was to ruin these law firms and the individual lawyers, like not lawyer, but honorable American citizens like Chris Krebs and Miles Taylor. This is unforgivable stuff, Ryan. Not only does he have no constitutional authority or authority under statutory law, this is corrupt under the Constitution and under the laws of the United States. If a president in the past would have issued one of these executive orders of personal vendetta, that would have been, ample grounds for impeachment.
To bear on it.
Oh my God! Of course. I mean, just think. Let's just think about out loud about that for a moment. The president of the United States uh, levels his own presidential powers and the powers of the entire federal government against an individual citizen because he doesn't like them. Now, in the case of Chris Krebs, for instance, if the story can be worse, it is, right? Chris Krebs worked for Donald Trump, and his only sin against Donald Trump was that he didn't agree with Donald Trump that that the election had been stolen from the president in 2020. Well, the only one that believes that election was stolen from Donald Trump is Donald Trump and his own sycophants. And here is Donald Trump, however many years later, issuing an executive order throwing the weight of the entire federal government against this one former administration official of his, because he dared to say that the election was not stolen from Donald Trump. That's a high crime or misdemeanor within the meaning of the impeachment clauses, without any question. Very few presidents have ever gone to the Department of Justice to give a speech or remarks. And when they have, it's always been on a special occasion of honor at the Department of Justice, or a particularly important signal event in the country at the time. And no president of the United States would ever even have thought on any of those occasions to say a political word. Fast forward to Donald Trump, and he stood in the Great Hall of the Department of Justice and desecrated the Department of Justice in a, with every word he spoke. As you know, it was really an event for him to officially weaponize the Department of Justice against his personal enemies. And that's almost a direct quote from Donald Trump, as you know. So we don't have a Department of Justice today, Ryan. We have the Department of Justice is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Oval Office. The first thing that the Attorney General did was get rid of all the good lawyers that follow the law and obey the law and believe in the constitutional laws of the United States. And they hired the kind of people that are making the arguments in front of the federal courts that we were just discussing. And, to no surprise, those lawyers, Brian, you can't even imagine how offensive and contemptuous the Department of Justice lawyers are to the federal judges' faces in court. Never, ever before has one single government lawyer spoken to judges the way all of these have. And as you know or may know, one of their lawyers who told the truth in response to a direct question from the federal judge was summarily fired or suspended. I don't know if they've been fired yet.
The judge who said that they made a mistake.
Yes. There is no scholar. There is no lawyer who would disagree with my statement today.
Yeah.
That it is unconstitutional to fire Jay Powell of the Federal Reserve Board. Anyone who has who speaks further on the issue would discuss the issue of the independent agencies and whether the law ought to be different.
Got it.
What's at issue here is a Supreme Court case, Humphrey's Executor, which was decided in 1935, and that was the landmark case in which the Supreme Court held that the chairman or members of a so-called independent agency could only be removed for cause. Okay. Now, that decision has applied to every independent agency and department since, up to and including the Federal Reserve. Now, so Donald Trump is asking the Supreme Court to overrule Humphrey's Executor, and that's long been an issue for the conservative movement, Ryan, and a legitimate issue. Okay, and if it's entirely possible that this Supreme Court will agree with the president as to some of the independent departments and agencies. I don't believe it will ever agree with respect to the Federal Reserve Board, for instance. But I don't take any position on it except this. We don't know. There were no such things as independent departments and agencies at the time of the founding or the framing of the Constitution. But if the founders had known that the federal government would come to have independent departments and agencies as it has in the 250 years since our founding, the one thing I am certain of is that the founders would have forbidden this particular president from ever having control over the Federal Reserve because of his irresponsibility. And I've often thought over the past few weeks, being the lawyer that I am, that Donald Trump has been making pro se the most compelling argument that could ever be made to the Supreme Court never to overrule Humphrey's executors. They are witnessing in real time what it would mean to give a president control over the Federal Reserve. I don't know any judge that I've ever known in my life, of the hundreds and hundreds, that would ever let this president have control over the Federal Reserve, Ryan. I don't have any confidence at all today, Ryan, that we will come out the other side of this. What I do know today is that it would be impossible to say after Donald Trump's first 100 days in office that America has a government of laws, not of men. And that's saying a lot.
Now, I would point out that the video at the beginning with Chris Murphy, any member of Congress could take that recording, that interrogation by Chris Murphy, and themselves turn it into a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation resolution. So it's public record now. So, there are many ways to do this. If people will just pull their heads out their rear and start thinking in terms of what the law actually says. Unfortunately, people like Jessica Denson, who are just reckless, and she just will not stop with what she thinks is the best way to go, will actually hurt the country. Because if we impeach Trump, we're going to be stuck with Vance and all of Trump's cronies that he put in there. Trump doesn't go anywhere. He's still the president behind Vance. He's still pulling the strings and still running the fears, like Vanadar revealed. So hit like and subscribe. Forward the video to friends. This is the truth. And it's not some excited live stream that really wastes an hour of your time and doesn't say much of anything of value.